Voice of Indonesia. Well, listeners and viewers of Voice of Indonesia, we know that United Nations has its own investment fund for the climate change, intends to reduce the carbon emission in the world. And to talk about this here today with me, Bapak Agus Sari. He is the CEO of Landscape Indonesia. How are you, Pak Agus Sari?
I'm very, very well. Thank you, Babane. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, as we know, Pak Agus, that the world is facing crisis, climate crisis on what we call the climate change, and then we are the population of the world are responsible to work on this. As the CEO of the Landscape Indonesia, Pak Agus, do you think the main objectives of the UN Investment Fund for Climate Change, and how are these aligned with the broader goals of the United Nations climate change agenda, including here we in Indonesia, Pak Agus Sari?
Yes, thank you, Papane. Hello, everybody. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the main agreement for the world to address the climate crisis, has the objective of keeping the changes in the climate due to our activities to the level that is safe for the atmosphere to support lives. And UNFCCC also has other agreements. The current one is the Paris Agreement, yes, which has the objectives of keeping the warming of the Earth well below 2 degrees Celsius, above the pre-industrial level, which is about the mid-19th century, and to work its best to keep it below 1.5 yes, degrees. And as we know that we have already reached 1.7 last year. In January was the hottest January ever, with a temperature of about 1.75 degrees Celsius, and we have actually reached a temperature of above 1.5 in the past 12-13 months. Mm-hmm. So basically the objective of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement is to keep us alive, more or less, yeah. That's what it is.
So that's it. We are still alive. Okay, Pak Agus. Yes, as you mentioned, Pak Agus, that Indonesia also is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, and we, Indonesia, committing to reducing the global greenhouse gas emission by 29% by 2030. What is the fund's primary focus in Indonesia, the UNFCCC, in terms of climate change? Is it focused on renewable energy, deforestation, or sustainable agriculture, or are there climate-related issues, Pak Agus Sari?
Yes. Well, the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement actually have two components. Yeah, the first one is what is called adaptation to climate change. Climate change is happening no matter what we're doing. Yeah, mm-hmm. There are some irreversible impacts, as you have probably noticed that we have 3 months of very, very intense rain.
Yes.
Yesterday, Puncak, which is probably unheard of before. Apologize for my cat. My cat is insisting in joining our Zoom. But anyway, Puncak actually suffers very severe flood yesterday. So that's also one of the concerns of the world, that we have been attacked by the severe crisis.
Yes.
Now, Indonesia's target has been embodied in what is called nationally determined contribution, and the target is to reduce emissions by 32% now, but not anymore 29%.
32%.
The enhanced one is 32% with our own resources, and 43% with international cooperation. The largest sector to which emissions will be reduced is the land use sector. We have a very, very bold and ambitious target of achieving what is called net sink by 2030, which means that emissions in the land use sector will be negative by 2030. It's about negative 140 million tons, which basically means that our forest is expected to absorb more emissions than it emits. Yeah. In the land use sector, and that basically means that it provides room for other sectors to have a little bit of emissions.
Okay.
Now, the second largest emitter is the energy sector, and that is because our energy sector is heavily carbon intensive. We still have about 2/3 of our electricity produced using coal, which is the dirtiest of all.
Yes.
And as such, we have very, very high emissions in the energy sector. Actually, our emissions are mostly dominated by the energy sector, but it is the forestry and other land uses sectors that would probably have the highest ambition to reduce. At the same time, we do have an ambition to reach net zero. That our emissions are at the same level or less than our ability to absorb by 2060 or earlier. And that is also a bold ambition, but that's consistent with basically the findings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in 2022, that we need to achieve net zero globally by about 2050. So some would have 2040, some would have 2050, some would have 2060 as their target year.
Okay, as you mentioned, Pa Agus, that net zero in 2060 or 2060 is a bold ambition. So what about the move, the increase from 29 to 32% in 2030, since, as you mentioned also, that we still use 2/3 of our energy by coal, and then we have, vehicles on the roads which mostly use the fossil, and then also we have deforestation is still on place. So, what do you say?
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic about the forest and other land uses. I think we are on track in achieving the net sink target. We have some, concerning trends in the past couple of years, that the rate of deforestation has increased slightly in the past couple of years, and that might actually disrupt our track to net sink by 2030. I'm a lot more concerned about, as you mentioned, Papane, the energy sector, because our energy sector is very, very carbon intensive. One of many ways for us to do that is the just energy transition, yeah, which is probably shown by the JETP program, the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which was launched at the G20 in Bali in 2021, in which that the program was to be mobilizing financing to the tune of about $20 billion. And that was the largest ever climate deal given to one country. No other country has been, pledged that much money for energy transition investments. One of the flagship program in JETP is what is called early retirement of coal power plants.
Okay.
So basically, our coal power plants would be retired earlier than they would be in its natural trajectory, so that to avoid future emissions. That's basically the big program now that I'm hoping to be successful for us to be able to achieve our targets.
Yes, Pak Agus, as you mentioned that we had the flash in the G20 in Bali in 2021 on energy transition. So how much do you think all those countries who have the flash at the time doing working on their track?
I've seen a mix, performances when it comes to fulfilling this major and ambitious program, which is called JETP. $20 billion is a lot.
Yes.
And with the U.S., moving out or exiting the Paris Agreement and exiting from JETP, of course, there's a major blow into the capacity to finance the entire 20 billion. Luckily, the European Union comes in to replace the U.S. Now the JETP is co-led by Japan and Germany. It used to be co-led by Japan and the U.S. But structuring financing to the tune of $20 billion is complex. So I would not expect it to be, to happen very quickly. It is delayed, but it's naturally delayed, I would say, because of the amount of money that's involved. But already JETP has managed to finance a couple of renewable energy programs, right? Especially geothermal. So it's a slow process, I would say, and it's slower than expected, or I would say slower as expected, because a lot of people are not expecting anything
after
fast.
2030, Pak Agus?
Up to 2030, yes. So we do have a regulation now that we can only build coal power plants until 2030. Beyond 2030, we will not be allowed to build any more new coal power plants, which means that we are going to reach our peak by 2030, and then by 2060 we will have zero coal-fired power plants. That's basically the plan under JETP.
Okay. And we are Indonesia. I mean, the Indonesian government's policy are on track to reach this.
I would say there are a lot of temptations to not achieve that target.
Oh,
Because early retirement of coal power plants is expensive. Yeah.
yes.
One calculation shows that for a typical coal power plant in Indonesia at about 1 gigawatt hours, 1 gigawatt, sorry, 1 gigawatt coal fired power plants retired 5 years early, that would reduce the NPV of the power plant by $70 million. So basically, retiring power plant early is a losing business.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a profitable business, and that's because in the 5 years of the coal power plant being retired early, we lose the potential income, right?
Yes.
So it's very difficult to finance a losing business using loan and equity. No investors would be crazy enough to invest in a business that is certainly losing. Yeah. So we need to find innovative ways to finance early retirement of our coal power plants beyond commercial investments that are readily available right now. That's basically the reason that there is strong temptation to just abandon the early retirement program.
Yes.
As you have heard, our Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources said that we have a lot of coal. Why shouldn't we use all of it?
Yes.
My response to the minister basically says that the Stone Age didn't stop because we ran out of stone. So coal age shouldn't stop because we ran out of coal. We should stop because there's better technology,
Yes.
cleaner technology, cheaper technology.
Yes. We have target for that.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Yes, Pak Agusari, this is not only the task, the responsibility of the government, of course, but there should be the involvement of private sectors or NGOs. So how do you access the UN Investment Fund for Climate Change approach, partnerships, say, with the NGO, communities, local business, or other investment funds?
Yeah, I've been lucky to have been involved in putting together a proposal for the government to the Green Climate Fund, which is the fund managed under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's a large fund. It's basically $100 billion fund, which is sizable. What I found in my experience is that it is so complex in getting access to that fund. The whole process would probably easily take about 5 years, and we don't know what is happening in the next 5 years, and we don't even know who our president is going to be in the next 5 years.
Yes.
So. We don't know whether the program is still relevant in the next 5 years. So that's what is going on with the UN fund. First is that it is, I would say, severely insufficient. Second is, even with the existing resources that it is already managing, the way to access it is a bit more complex than most countries would be able to manage. Yeah. As you know that there's a lot of assessment that the world would need $1.3 billion of fund per year.
Yes.
And the fund under the UNFCCC is way below it. Yeah, it's about 100 billion right now, or even less than 100 billion. The pledge was to reach 100 billion per year, but it's not even close to it. And the current agreement is to achieve 300 billion by 2035. 2035 is still 10 years from now, and we shouldn't even take a pledge that long that seriously. So we are severely underfunded and severely badly managed, I would say.
Okay. Pak Agus Sari, as you mentioned, you are directly involved on this, and then I believe that Landscape Indonesia that you lead also work on this. So, do you have a successful story? Just say, I want to hear something on the successful story on the already we reach in terms of the UN investment funds for climate change here in Indonesia.
Yes. Before Paris Agreement, we have Kyoto Protocol, and we have a number of ways for the developed countries transferring money, transferring funds and resources to developing countries. One of which is through carbon market. And if we're talking about resource transfer in terms of grants and compare it with resource transfer through carbon market, I would say that carbon market far exceeds the amount of grants. So unfortunately, carbon market mechanism under the Paris Agreement only got approved last year by the UNFCCC. So the mechanism has just been developed, and it has not been executed fully. But I still have high hopes that when it is executed fully, we will be able to find sufficient resources to finance our decarbonization initiatives. The early retirement for our coal power plants, for example, could be financed partly or even mostly by carbon market.
Okay. Pak Agus, it seems that we are coming to the end of this interview, but would you make a closing statement on this regarding the UN investment funds for climate change, and especially what we are doing here in Indonesia, Pak Agus Sari?
Yes. First is that we should take the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and other climate agreements seriously. We shouldn't even be disturbed by the news that the U.S. has left the agreement.
Yes.
I think we should be able to do whatever we should need to do without the U.S. So, the second is that we need to be innovative in finding resources to finance our decarbonization, and I believe that we have our own resources domestically in Indonesia, especially since renewables are already competitive in terms of cost against coal and other fossil fuels. So we need to focus on deploying more renewables in Indonesia. And third, of course, we need to find ways to manage the impacts of climate change that we have already felt today. And it will eventually disrupt our food security, our energy security, and many other sectors. So we need to pay careful attention to the impact as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Agus Sari. This is very interesting conversation, but we have a very limited time. Maybe we will talk about this more and more later in another time. Once again, thank you very much, Pak Agus Sari, for your time.
Thank you. Have a good morning. Bye.
Thank you. Well, listeners and viewers of Voice of Indonesia, that was my very interesting conversation with Dr. Agusari, the CEO of Landscape Indonesia, regarding the UN Investment Funds for Climate Change. And I'm Dalat Pane. See you next time.
Voice of Indonesia.